Hi, David. My name is Samantha Guerrero. As you know, I am currently an assistant project manager at Link Housing, a nonprofit affordable housing developer. I look forward to interviewing you today. To start, can you introduce yourself?
David Salazar, and currently I'm the executive director of the Long Beach Community Design Center.
Here's the first question to kick off our interview. What brought you to urban planning? How did you initially get introduced into the field of planning?
So my entry point was through basically I got my degree in sociology. So that was my entry point. I took a class in urban studies, and that's how my interest got sparked. And then after I graduated from Long Beach State, went directly into the master's program at Cal Poly Pomona.
Thank you for sharing that insight about your foundations that led you into planning. Can you talk more about the connection from sociology that you saw leading into urban planning?
Yeah. So sociology always interests me since, I was in college, right? I took some classes in cultural anthropology, sociology, but I really liked I really like studying society and people and communities, political structures and political systems. So that was really sort of my grounding. And then that really was a good way for me to sort of understand sort of my physical environment. And that's where the urban planning sort of thoughts kicked in, and then my focus on that and my interest in urban planning.
Which planning school did you attend?
Okay. Yeah. So entered the program there at Cal Poly, got my degree, working basically while I was working on my degree, working full time, right? And then started a family. So it was a different kind of experience than just straight on graduate school. It took me a little bit longer than I thought, but I got through it. And then when I graduated, or just before I graduated, I should say, is that I took some internships, right? So I did about 3 internships, one in affordable housing. I thought I was going to be a housing person. Didn't turn out that way. A couple in city government. So I thought to myself, well, I'll just make a career in city planning, city government, work for a city or a county or that kind of thing. And so that led me to the city of Whittier, and that was my first job. And their classifications, which was kind of funny, they had like Planner 1, Planner 2, Planner 3, and, that kind of, step process, right? So I started out as a Planner 1 and did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was good for me in terms of there was a good bridge between what I learned at Cal Poly in terms of zoning and land use and CEQA, and working on different plans, strategic plans, and specific plans and general plan updates and that kind of thing. But it really wasn't something that I thought that I would be suited for long term, because really wanted to be creative, and I actually wanted to like build things, do things, right? Do the plan and actually build something. And it wasn't going to happen in city government for me.
It is great to hear you explain the distinctions between the different sectors in the planning field. There's public, private, and nonprofit sectors. What are your most memorable projects that you have completed in your planning career? What were their impacts?
Yeah, so in city planning there in Whittier, there really wasn't really a project that I worked on, because it was more like regulatory, just like day-to-day stuff, working on the counter. Probably the thing that stuck out for me the most is I was able to sort of work. They had a design review committee, so it gave me a little bit of opportunity to kind of look at urban design and propose projects, write them up in terms of a staff report and all that. But I think my big takeaway from Whittier in terms of a project or a task was just learning the fundamentals of city government and city planning. That was my big takeaway. And I still use it today, especially understanding sort of how decisions get made at the city council level, at the planning commission level, that kind of thing. So that was real important.
What were other major career milestones after your role with the City of Whittier?
Right. So I left the city of Whittier again after, like, I can't remember, 4 or 5 years, but I just stumbled onto another career, and that career was campus planning. And it was just it was happenstance, right? And I tell people in those days, when you looked for a job, you went to the newspaper. So you looked at the classified ads. There was no such thing as the internet, right? So you looked at the classified ads, looked at jobs, and then I saw this job as facility planner for the Cal State University system. And they talked about some of the same things I learned in school, especially on the master planning level. But there was a lot of things related to sort of capital planning, working with architects, engineers, all these other things that I had no experience doing. So my wife coaxed me. She said, you really need to apply for that job. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then I got it. And then I wound up working for the chancellor's office, the system-wide office here in Long Beach. And then made my career after that, a 30-year career basically in campus planning.
Let's talk about your nonprofit, the Long Beach Community Design Center. Did you always envision starting a nonprofit?
No, I had no idea what nonprofits were about, how you run nonprofits, how you organize them, how you do anything. And the reality is that after those 30 years working in higher ed and doing campus planning, I retired and then basically did nothing for a year. And then it gave me an opportunity to kind of reflect on what where my career had been and what I really wanted to do going forward, right? Whether, not working at all or doing consulting or, it was all up in the air at that time. So, being here like now, being in the city for 10 years now, I'd look back now and thought to myself, well, where can I make an impact with all the knowledge I have and all my expertise and all my network? Where could make the biggest impact? And I came to the reality it's a nonprofit, and it's a nonprofit based on providing services to underserved communities, because that's always been my foundation, right? And so that's how it evolved. And then the honest thing too is that I just went online and said, how do you start a nonprofit? Literally just typed it in, and then I just went from there. I had no clue, but I had a lot of friends and I had a big network. So I sort of called together all my friends, at that time it was all on the internet and on Zoom, and basically said, if I start this nonprofit, will you guys support me, in terms of services? And they all said yes. And so I said, okay, then I'll go ahead and do it. And now we're into our 5th year.
Of course, I was the first intern for the Design Center, and it has been a pleasure to see how much it has grown in just 4 years. Your story also highlights the importance of having a strong planning network to support career endeavors. To ground some of these experiences, I would like to know, how do you see your lived experience integrated into your planning work?
So, when I first started, when I first entered college way back when, right? So I came out of a family, especially through my brother, about political activism, right? And then we were involved in the Chicano movement in the 70s and all the way into the 80s. So I had all that sort of foundational sort of, perspective on the world and sort of where we fit in the world and where our communities fit in the world. So that sort of drove me on the political side about sort of what did I want to do with my career and who did I want to serve, right? And who should I be serving, right? So that, and planning was a good way for me to accomplish that, because at some point in time I could get involved. I was thinking in terms of like community development and things of that nature, right? So that's kind of what sort of fortified my experience in planning, right? And then helped launch the nonprofit, because the nonprofit was all about, here in Long Beach serving underserved communities. So that's our main focus, right? So we're not out to make a buck. We're not out to enrich ourselves or win awards for all these different things. It's really about serving the community and providing them services that typically they wouldn't have, and act as a liaison with those communities and a facilitator to move forward issues.
In what ways were you able to bring in your lived experience in your role as a campus planner?
So the campus planning part was, and I use that probably more today than I do the city government experience, although I use both really. But the campus planning taught me how to build things, right? And how to do contracts and how to negotiate, deals of some sort, right? Related to sort of making things happen. And I didn't get that from planning school because they didn't teach you that, right? But I just learned it on the job. So I know the world of architecture. I know the world of engineering, and all the different related disciplines that it needs that you need to actually do things and build things, projects, right? And be a project manager too, right? Be a successful project manager. So that was something I just learned on the job, basically, over the years.
The planning fields can be tough for many reasons. What motivated you to keep going and doing this work?
Yeah, so a career is sort of like a bit of a roller coaster ride. It could be, right? So some of the jobs, I think over my career, I had like 6 jobs, 6 different jobs, and the longest I've ever stayed at a job was close to 10 years, and the rest of them were between 5 and 6 years. So my motivation was actually to get involved and be involved in organizations that actually did things and made meaningful change and were doing like innovative and creative things. I think I talked about the innovative creative part, and that's part of what sort of drove me. And then also, the persistence that you need, right? And things don't always turn out the way you want them to. And sometimes, it can get really rocky in terms of a position that you have in a career. And because there's all these forces involved, right? Internally and externally and all that other stuff. And it's easy to sort of get discouraged sometimes, right? In terms of, moving forward in your career. But I always sort of, like anyone else, I mean, you say like, oh, gee, that was terrible, or that wasn't a good experience. But each time you learn from those experiences and you just get better and better at managing things, right? And staying with it and staying positive, because there's a million things to be negative about, right? And you don't discard, you don't like just say that it doesn't exist, but you just don't put all your energy into that. You put most of your energy into the positive part.
When you started working in this field, did you notice a diverse mix of age ranges on your planning teams? If so, how do you see any shifts happening now in the current planning field?
Yeah, so when I first entered the field, through Cal Poly, right, that was my first orientation in the world of planning, and I knew that the organization APA, American Planning Association, was really important for me to get involved in. And when I got involved, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of representation in terms of, planners of color, right? In my class, I think there was probably one African American person and one other Latino, and the other guy was from Mexico, right? So it was just me and him, and then one black person, right? So that wasn't a good sign for me, because I thought, well, the profession really needs to change. It needs to be more inclusive. So when I got involved in the American Planning Association, it was more than just going to conferences and seeing what people are working on and sort of entering the network. It was also about bringing people on board, right? Other students that were like me, and to start talking about those issues, whatever those issues were, in terms of sort of being more inclusive. And that's kind of what kept me involved with APA all along, right? It wasn't just AICP certification or anything like that. It was really about sort of making the organization, both at the state level and the national level, reflect those communities that they were serving.
How has the American Planning Association California chapter evolved and changed over the years, especially for Latinos in planning?
So when I got involved in APA, at the chapter level, at the state level, working with another colleague of mine, an African American colleague, we decided, we really need to include and institutionalize some version of inclusion and equity, and at the time there was no such thing as DEI, right? It was all about just inclusive sort of policies in order to make changes. So we started working on that, and now there's actually I guess a representative on the statewide chapter, an inclusion director, right? But it didn't exist before. So That was a big one. And then also the diversity related to the divisions at the national level, right? They had existing divisions, but we thought there was nothing representing Latinos, right? So we decided, okay, working with some folks on the East Coast, then we had a West Coast presence, and then we basically developed Latinos in Planning. And now it's doing well, I think. I'm not involved in the way, like day-to-day stuff, right? But I think it's important that they have that forum and that voice, and I'm glad that it still exists and is moving forward.
What are you most proud of accomplishing in your leadership roles with APA?
I think probably that, because it really sort of brought on and addressed an issue that wasn't there and needed to be addressed, and it's really for the health of the profession too, right? Because there's nothing worse than having sort of, I'll call, like, outside sort of expertise or outside entities putting together solutions for communities when the community really knows what's best, but they didn't have the expertise to do that, right? They didn't have the internal sort of folks on their side that are either trained planners or designers and that can really understand those needs at a much deeper level. So I am proud of that too. But the other part of it too is that I decided to become AICP when I was at Monterey Bay, and it was sort of this decision I had to make. I invested so much time and energy, being a planner and being serious about doing meaningful things, that I thought I need to do it, right? And so I did it. The benefit was just basically recognition, right? To have that certification. It didn't make me any more money, or didn't do anything like that, right? It was more or less like, okay, so I'm a planner now at that level, right? And I'm certified, and I get my ticket punch, sort of, right? And then the other piece of that is that something that I didn't realize or even thought or dreamed about, when I was going through this whole process of building my career, is that through AICP, then I was approached to say, hey, why don't you approach to be a fellow? Right. And then I thought to myself, what, God, I don't know if I want to do that. Right. And then it went through this whole process. And then lo and behold, find out that I was the first Latino fellow in the state of California. There are other fellows throughout the country, like in Florida and Texas and stuff like that. But here in California, and then I came to realize after that, and thinking about it, is like, why did it take so long for me, David Salazar from Pico Rivera, California, to be the first Latino fellow? It was like 3 years ago. It was during the pandemic, basically. And we're trying to make that happen, right? So since that time, I take this stuff seriously. So I thought to myself, I can't be the only one, and I don't want to be the only one, and I shouldn't be the only one, right? So since that time, 2001, right, during the pandemic, I was able to sort of help two other individuals and so there's a number two now, and that's Miguel Vasquez from Riverside. So he's on board, but we've been talking about, where's the Latina, right? There's a gender issue there too, right? So hopefully we can identify someone in the very near future and make that happen.
What is your advice to someone considering the AICP certification?
Yeah, and I'll answer that two ways. One from a personal standpoint, and then one from like a professional career standpoint. So personal, it's all about like I said before, my investment and all the time and effort I spend to be a planner. I thought, yeah, of course I'm gonna have to take the exam and be at AICP, and I took it really serious. I joined a study group, studied nonstop and dram about it and everything. It's like, what I mean? I was all crazy because I thought to myself, well, if I don't pass this class, I'm not really a planner. I was thinking crazy stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that was on the personal side, but on the professional side, it's more like, so how do you want to identify yourself professionally, right? You have a degree, either you don't have to have a degree in planning to be AICP, but most folks do, right? So how you want to distinguish yourself? How do you want to put yourself out there in terms of that? Is it going to like make this tremendous, just, pointing your career, or is it going to be like this make or break thing? No, no, it's not going to do that. But I think it's a way to say, this is our profession. This is this is your career. This is who you are. This is a product of your investment. And from that standpoint, I think it's not going to hurt you, put it that way. Right. But there are some practical issues in terms of cost and all that. It's not cheap, unfortunately. So there's a lot of constraints there that some folks have, and I get that.
What has been the biggest lesson you've learned from developing youth programs?
So the youth program that we develop a pipeline here in the city, and it wasn't when I first started the design center. I didn't have an idea that they would be a pipeline at all. I was more focused just on providing planning and architectural services, right? Just the services themselves, but not necessarily a youth program or a youth engagement program. But after the first year, I thought, why not? And the reason I thought about that is that I was thinking, why not have youth be involved in some of these projects as a learning experience? That was the original thought, right? How do I get youth plugged into some of these things that we're doing? And then from there, it evolved into, well, why not, figure out a way to bring youth to the academic, programs, right? But there's a lot of constraints too, money, access, all this other stuff, right? So, I sort of just started thinking about, what do I call a program like this to get it started, and where can I get it started? So it really began with the Young Communities Planners of Long Beach, and that was really focused on the teen centers in the city, right? After school teen centers, doing workshops with the Cal Poly students, the undergrad students, and then would be doing workshops to expose them, kind of like the ABCs of planning, right? And then give them an opportunity to go on campus and see what sort of a university campus is like a day experience, right? So, and then from there it evolved into, well, let's create a pipeline where we can bring those students actually to an academic discipline. And I thought the probably the easiest way for that to accomplish was for them to go to a community college, right? At least that was like an entry point. So I started working with the local community college here in Long Beach City to create an associate's degree in urban planning. And then they were very receptive, and now it exists, and it's the first one in the state of California. And then I've been doing some research, and I'm finding out that it may be the first associate's degree in urban planning in the country.
Those are some amazing highlights, and it is definitely necessary to focus on the youth and invest into the youth in order to grow the field of planning that way. In your experience, what has the younger generation of planners taught you?
They taught me that, how do I put this, is that all they need is guidance, right? And the ability for someone to give them like reassurance and courage to do the things that they want to do, right? So that, when we're working with the teen centers especially, I mean, a lot of those students aren't going to become planners. I mean, they're just going to, do their thing, or either go on to college or not go on to college. But what I'm learning from them is that they have tons of potential, and they're super intelligent. They know exactly what's going on in their communities. They can tell you everything, up and down and sideways about what's wrong and what needs to be, corrected or changed, or what's going on in their world. So I think that's the part that that I get most excited about, like working with young people, and then providing them a pathway. And like I said, not all of them are going to get on that pathway, but some of them will. And if they don't, at least they have a better idea of sort of their physical environment, and then they can become kind of citizen planners, or just engage civically in government, right, or in their neighborhoods, and know how to sort of address issues, and have it a little bit more understood about why things happen the way they do in their neighborhoods.
This is our final question. Where would you like to see the field of planning go next?
So now that I'm working in the nonprofit world and been doing it, for close to 5 years now, very different than campus planning, very different than city planning and municipal planning. Um, I think the more I'm more grounded in the community and in place, right? So my whole my thought process now is that place matters, right? Where you're at in terms of a neighborhood, a city, a state, right? That place and the history of that place and the people that make up that history and all that lived experience, right? That within the last year is becoming more important to me, right? And it's sort of being elevated for me in a big way, right? And the other part is related to that place is that, community building, right? So you do have places everywhere, right? And some of those places aren't the best places, but there's community there regardless, right? And there's a lot of community there in those areas and those places that want the best things, right? That want a quality of life, right? It's not all about negativity. So that's the other part that I hope that the field of planning sort of focuses more on, right? There's the technical part of the planning process, right? That you need to understand it and how just, from a policy standpoint and how those things work. But the other for me is that those things don't matter until those communities sort of have are a part of that, right?
Well, David, thank you for sitting with me today and having a conversation. Every time we talk, I learned something new about you and the field of planning. It was truly an honor to interview you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.